welcome back to the Get Loved Up podcast. I am so excited about all the feedback we have been getting. And today, this show is especially for the community. Y'all said y'all wanted more shows on mental health, and we are delivering it today. Today, our special guest is Dr. Rheeda Walker. She is an award-winning professor of psychology, a fellow in the American Psychological Association, and a leading scholar who has published more than 60 scientific papers on African-American mental health, suicide risk, emotional resilience. She does it all. She is also a licensed clinical psychologist who prepares doctoral students for independent careers. Dr. Walker's impact has expanded beyond academia, and she has quickly become a fan favorite with the release of her first book, The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. Delving into the heart of the Black experience, Dr. Walker debunks myths about mental health and builds a case for psychological fortitude and delivers practical advice for use in everyday life. Her charismatic vision and practical approach to life's challenges has led to numerous appearances on Good Morning America, The Breakfast Club, and NPR, among others. She is often quoted in major publications like The Washington Post, The Los Angeles Times, The Huffington Post, GQ Magazine, and The Houston Chronicle. Dr. Walker's eclectic mix of experiences positions her well to achieve her ultimate goal of bringing culturally informed psychological fortitude to both professional and lay audiences. Dr. Walker! Hi, how are you?
I'm great. I'm just really glad to be here for this conversation.
I am just blown away with what you've done, with what you've written. And I just can't wait to get to know you. I can't wait to meet you in person. First of all, you are just glowing. For those of you who are not looking at the YouTube video, you have to go to look at the YouTube video because you're just glowing. You're filling up the room with so much just grace and happiness. But I know it hasn't always been like this for you. Can you give us a little background of kind of your history and what made you move into the mental health space?
Well, I'll tell you, growing up as a young Black girl in the South, I always got messaging about what I could and could not do and what was and was not acceptable and just a lot of limitations. But at the same time, I had parents who said, you can do anything that you put your mind to. So there was just this duality of, on the one hand, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far, but then you can do anything that you put your mind to. And so I think I always, kind of walked that sort of tightrope of how do you navigate all of that. And I had that always in mind. And even when I went off to college and thinking about my major, I was wondering, where are the conversations about people from my community in these textbooks? I didn't really think that my experience was represented in the textbook. And that's why I decided to pursue a career in psychology, thinking, if I get a doctoral degree, then that's where the answers reside. Well, that wasn't really the case. And so I have just really developed my whole career around understanding mental health, especially from the unique perspective of people of African descent.
That is beautiful. And we need it especially now. What have you seen as you've really experienced this last year of, the surge in mental health challenges, especially in the Black community? What have you found is the biggest challenges, and what have you found to be the biggest solution at this time?
That's a pretty heavy question, with so many different layers, because a big part of what has allowed the community to, if I can venture to say, thrive, despite everything that we have endured for generations, is an important connection to community and a recognition of who we are. So despite all the things and the negative messaging about what it means to be a Black person, we've been able to connect with our creativity and sense of spirituality and recognizing that we find strength in our community. And that has been really very important. The challenge in the pandemic has been we have been separated in a lot of ways from people who are important to us in the community, and not just people, but also for those who oftentimes would go to, say, a place of worship on Sunday or on Saturday. There's that disconnection. So that has been tremendously challenging on top of just the day-to-day stress. A lot of folks had to start working from home, as an example, but then there are children at home. And how do you do that without losing your mind? Some folks say you don't. So that has been one part of the struggle. And what I have, desperately tried to communicate is that the solutions is more so in the moment to moment decisions that we're making. I appreciate your work because you talk about, just taking a breath, like one moment, at a time and getting from one moment to the next. Because what happens is that if we start to think about next week, next month, last year we were thinking about next year. And this year doesn't look like people were planning. So we get too far ahead of ourselves and that overwhelms us. And that's why we have to pay attention to the smaller moments, the smaller decisions that we're making for ourselves and for our families, moment to moment, day to day.
Oh, I love everything about that. And it is true. I mean, there's challenges on top of challenges. And one word where you were speaking that kept coming up into my soul is just resilience.
Yes.
And our ability as Black women specifically, you and I, as we identify, and how much resilience we've had to have, not just us in our lifetime, but also our ancestors. Can you speak a little bit about what that resilience, because not everyone is feeling very resilient right now. So for those who are feeling like, this is hard, I am not okay. What advice would you give someone? We know take it one day at a time, and one breath at a time. But what practical advice do you share with people, especially? And I kind of wanted, I just dive right in. I let the conversation flow how it flows. And I know you share a lot of tools in your book. So I really want to, give some people some takeaways today of what they can do if they're not feeling so well. They're feeling, I'm drained, I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed, and I'm not okay.
Yeah, I always recommend that everyone do a regular self-assessment. And I know that this works because this is what I do. And it's what I do as a clinical psychologist, recognizing that sometimes we create solutions and the solutions don't help because we haven't done a good job of assessing, well, what's going on? Like, what's the problem? And so for me, at the beginning of the pandemic, one of the things that I said was, it's good to have a big project that you have control over. We didn't have control over the pandemic. And that's one of the reasons that it was so overwhelming, because so many of our rights and our privileges were taken away from us. So what are the things we have control over? So I would say things like, if you have a closet project, you've been saying, I need to, clean out that closet. It might sound like work, but it is a mindful activity when you have to think about, okay, what's in that closet that needs to go out? What am I going to do with the things in the closet? And then the experience of the closet being cleaned out is like, oh my goodness, I did that. I didn't have a closet, but I told myself I was going to start a garden, because I realized when I went to the store, there were so many things that I needed that were not on the shelves. And that alarmed me that I thought, well, maybe this is the time for me to start learning how to grow things. Now, did I start that garden in March of 2020? I did not. We can talk about that. But I did start the garden in March of 2021, because what I realized back then was that I was overwhelming myself with this garden project and I just never got it done because I was overthinking it. And so this year I was able to say, okay, what are the small steps? What are the micro steps that I need to engage in order to achieve this garden? I was thinking macro steps. And that's what we oftentimes do. We think about the big project and we don't think about the tiny things that we need to achieve on a day-to-day basis, maybe starting back in January, which is what I did, because I was like, ooh, March is coming. Let me think about what I need to do in January to set myself up for a success in March. And again, there are always things that are out of our control. The pandemic has been out of our control. Whether or not we can see our friends has been out of our control, but not whether or not we can see our friends virtually, right? And so, we can, the thing about going moment to moment is that we're able to tap into or give ourselves room to tap into our creativity to come up with alternatives to the big picture. So the big picture is I want to connect with folks. I can't connect with folks the way I want to. How can I connect with folks still in a meaningful way?
Right. And you mentioned closet projects, and I actually had a spring cleaning project where I cleaned out everything in my closet, and it felt so good. It was like clearing the clutter from my mind. And I didn't do it alone, because I talk about all the time, don't be afraid to ask for help. So I actually got an organizer to come out and help me declutter my closet, declutter my home, and organize my kitchen. And I'm telling you, it's one of the best things I could have ever did for my mental health.
Absolutely. We think of a cleaning out closet. It really is kind of a metaphor. Like when we clean out our physical space, it really does help our emotional space. And for people who don't believe it, who are like, it's not that big a deal, try it. Just try it as an experiment. And this is what I will say to any client or patient that's like, yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if it's going to work. Guess what? You're right. You don't know. And that's why you just try it. And then we'll talk about how it worked out or how it didn't work out. But we have to put one foot in front of the other. We can't march in place and expect things to change. It doesn't really work that way.
That's right. They say don't knock it until you try it.
Exactly.
So I'm all about trying it. And I think it's so important when it comes to mental health too, to really acknowledge how you're feeling. And I know a lot of people, women specifically, we tend to guard our feelings or feel like, you know what, no one really cares. Or, if I share my feelings, I got to hold it together for myself and my family, my community. We put so much pressure on ourselves. And what do you have to say to that? How can we as women start to acknowledge our pain more, our sadness and our grief?
It's important that what you mentioned just now really was the messaging that we give ourselves. I am 100% on board with an approach to work that we call cognitive behavioral, that our thoughts affect our emotions, affect our behavior. And we have to start by being careful about what are the things that we're telling ourselves about reaching out for help. Because some of us will say, well, nobody wants to hear about that. Some of us will say, I'll look weak or I'll look like something's wrong with me, if I ask for help. Mm-hmm. Well, where's the evidence for that? Like what data do you have that confirms that someone will say you're weak if you ask for help, especially if you're struggling? Are you someone who's struggling every day? Or are you someone who is knocking it out the park, 364 days of the year? Like, seriously, we have to start with our thinking. And one of the things that I will say for anyone who likes to help other people and always wants for someone to certainly reach out to them if they're struggling, what would you say if that person needed help and didn't reach out to you? Now put yourself in the reverse position, that you need help and you don't reach out to that person. How might they feel? And you don't know, right? Again, it's another one of those experiments where you say, you know what, let me just do something different today. I've struggled so much and had so much challenge, and usually I don't ask for help, but today I'm going to ask for help and see how it goes. And asking for help has to be very specific. It can't just be, hey, y'all help me. Because people don't know what we need, right? So you have to set people up for success and say, if you have just 15 minutes that I can just share with you what's going on, I don't even really need you to help me problem solve. I just need you to tell me I'm not crazy. Or if you need like half an hour at the end of a workday, just to be able to pretend you have a virtual happy hour, send them some drinks in the mail, legally, y'all know what to do. Send a package in the mail and say, hey, we're going to meet up at 5:30 and we're going to have half an hour that we're just going to connect. So one is trying something different and saying, you know what, I would want them to reach out to me if they needed help. So I'm going to try reaching out if I need help. And two, being very specific about what it is that we need. Some folks have, families who are struggling. And I know that there have been some creative strategies around creating like family bubbles. Like, we agree we're not going to go outside the house anywhere else for 2 weeks so that our family can connect for a Friday night or a Saturday evening. That takes planning and it takes trust. But those are some of the ways that I know folks can reach out, especially now, to get the support and help that they need.
I love that. And I don't think I've heard that before, the family bubble, 2 weeks of quarantining so that you can connect safely. That's really beautiful. And I think it's important, like you said, if you have that person you can reach out to, that you're checking in with on a regular basis, and especially checking on your strong friends, the ones that you think got it all together, just asking them, are you okay? How you doing? And I also love like some of the things you share in your book, and I want to kind of dive in because you share so many great resources. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, I'll tell you, the thing that inspired me was something really sad and tragic. And that was the suicide rate that's been going up, especially for young Black children. I have been doing this work for the better part of 2 decades, specifically in the area of understanding suicide risk and resilience. And based on the theoretical framework that I approach, I'm kind of not surprised by the increase in suicide for young Black people. I just didn't expect to see it in my lifetime, to be honest. And so what that said to me was all of this information that I've been sitting on, it's time for it to go into the community. So I have publications that go on a shelf that no one reads, but these are practical skills and strategies that I felt like we as adults need to have, caregivers, teachers, parents, grandparents, and auntie nims, that there was information that community needed in order to be able to manage our own emotional health, because we can't help youth and young people until we get ourselves right. And so that's what inspired me to write the book, to get the information out and really to help folks think about mental health in ways that we absolutely avoid, especially in the Black community.
I love that. I'm so grateful you've given us this resource. And is there anything that you're saying, like, what is causing this rise in the suicide rate?
Well, I can't say that we reliably have the science to support any theory, but what I would say, based on the work that I've been doing, is that it's a combination of factors. That there is untreated depression and untreated anxiety. And one of the things that can escalate that is experiences of discrimination and microaggressions and not being able to manage that, like not having any context for, say, another child calling a child the N-word, or not having a context of, well, why did the police kill that person? Aren't the police supposed to protect us? And having these slights, in classrooms and neighborhoods, and not having on the other side of that, the resilience, a positive sense of identity, especially I think now more so than in earlier generations of African-American people, there's less of a connection or less of a positive connection to what it means to be Black. Because, we want to be part of the, melting pot too. We want to be part of the American dream. And so I think that there has, until very recently. So I wrote the book before, George Floyd was murdered last summer. I didn't know that was coming. But what I did know was that racism seemed to be everywhere in our society and permeating it in so many different ways, but that we didn't necessarily have the language to say, you know what, that was stressful. And this stressful thing that keeps happening, it's starting to have a psychological effect. And if we don't deal with it, then it's going to continue to have adverse consequences. And I think we start to see that trickling down for young people.
Right. Oh, I totally agree. It's been really hard and it's only getting harder. And luckily, we're starting to talk about therapy and talk about getting help more. What do you feel are some of those tools that people can use if they're feeling depressed, if they're feeling like, what, I'm not okay and I don't want to be here. Like I'm tired. A lot of people are feeling like that right now.
A lot of folks are, and you're right. I'm glad that we're living in a time now that folks can be more honest about it, even if they're not sure exactly what to do.
It's your time to step into your full power and potential. Are you tired of playing small and ready to make a big difference in the world? If your answer is yes, then the Wellness Entrepreneur Mastermind is for you. This mastermind will give you all the tools you need to turn your passion into purpose and live from a space of abundance as you let go of your limiting beliefs and negative self-talk. We coach you to thrive 1 week at a time, one goal at a time. We teach you what's working right now and what's not, so you can position yourself as a community leader and create real change in the world. If you're ready to level up and stand in your power, then go to koyawebb.com/mastermind to join our next group of wellness entrepreneurs. Space is limited and your time is now, so don't delay. Make a difference today.
And I always appreciate when folks say things or ask me, well, do you think I need to see a professional? Well, my first thought is, well, if you're asking me, then you probably need to see a professional. Because guess what? Part of our training is to be able to assess, ideally, to be able to assess whether or not, what you've been experiencing is within normal limits or whether or not it's kind of outside the boundaries. And for you all who may be thinking about, well, okay, but I don't want to go talk to anybody. I'm just not there yet. Well, that's one reason I wrote the book. But also just think about, is there anything about my level of emotion that's keeping me from being present, at work, to focus on my job, to be able to take care of my children? Am I sleeping now 4 to 5 hours a night because I can't seem to relax and calm down? Whenever there are disruptions in daily life, it probably means it's time to see a professional. Now, one of the things that I did introduce in the book, because I know just the language of mental health, is scary for some people, not for your listeners, because obviously your listeners are ready to talk about mental health. But for those folks who aren't quite ready, to use the language of psychological fortitude, because we all need to be able to have a way to track, am I able to function at work? Am I able to function in my classes that I'm taking outside of work? Am I able to take care of my health? A lot of people have serious health conditions that just don't have the wherewithal to eat healthy and exercise. Like, who can do that when you're barely trying to survive? And be able to balance, the vicarious racism that we see in the news and that we see around us. Like, what is your ability to be able to balance all those things on a 0 to 10 scale? So when somebody says, how you doing? You say, I'm fine. No, we're not doing any of that. We're asking, what's your psychological fortitude right now? Or what's your PF right now? One of my girlfriends caught me off guard a few weeks ago. We were texting and she said, well, what's your PF? And I was like, well, it's a 6 right now, but thank you. And what that did was to tell her, like, well, hey, let's touch base sometime, let's schedule a time to talk, on video. Let's get a chat together by the weekend. Now, if I had said I'm fine, which I could have done, she would have been like, okay, cool. But giving a ratings, like for anyone whose rating is a 6 or lower, you probably need to do something different. Now, if you're at 7 or higher, I'm like, okay, great. Think about what you can do to sustain that, because there are lots of things that can happen that can undermine PF or psychological fortitude.
I love that. I love that rating system. And I'm going to start using that, because I feel like it is for those of us who are like, entrepreneurs, and we're used to being okay and continuing to go. I think that checking in, like, where are you exactly? And then if you're not okay, well, where are you in not okay? Are you a 6 not okay? Or are you like a 3 not okay? Like, I can't get out of bed. And so, and I know I've definitely been there in the last year. And I had to tell some friends, like, I can't even make it over your house. I just need to sleep. They're like, are you okay? I'm like, nope, I need to chill. And so what are some of those things that you've experienced when you're like a 6 or below? Because like I said, I want to share, because a lot of people learn by hearing like, oh, okay, well, if she's dealt with those under 6s, then I can get through my under 6 moments too. So can you share a little bit about some of the things that have impacted you and your lifetime and how you've dealt with them?
Well, I am just incredibly mindful of how, almost borderline obsessive, with how I'm doing most of the day, because I have to make decisions, all day, every day about the kinds of things that I'll take on, like the new assignments and new responsibilities. So oftentimes I do have to just say no, because I'm anticipating there's something else around the corner that I'm not going to be able to say no to. So I am very intentional about the things that I take on and the things that I decide not to take on, and sometimes making really, really tough decisions. So in those other moments, because again, I talk about there's kind of like the macro moments or the big things, and then there's the micro things. So one of the micro things is whenever I'm in the shower, because we take showers, some folks take bubble baths, regularly, that I make sure to be in the moment. I'm not in the shower thinking about what I need to do that day or what I didn't do that day or what responsibility. I am fully immersed in feeling the water on my body, letting it, sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cool, and just noticing the water, because that allows me to be able to release any tension or tightness that I might otherwise feel because I'm thinking about the day and I'm really stressed out. Sometimes I get in my head so much that it's important for me, if I can grab a journal, because I do journal, to just jot down my thoughts. I don't have to write, 2 to 3 pages. Sometimes I write a sentence or a paragraph, because I know if I tell myself I have to write a page and explain the whole thing, then I'm not going to sit down and write anything. And sometimes folks need to just grab whatever napkin or receipt or whatever is handy and just get the thoughts out of your head, because we will ruminate like all day, every day. And rumination is not solving the problem. Like, rumination is just, they get on my nerves. I can't believe they do that. Why would they do that? They should know how to act. And that's not helping. So when we get the thoughts out of our head, believe it or not, it also gives us room to problem solve and to be creative. I have music playlists. Sometimes I get in my car and I like to turn it up really loud. I'm from the South. I listen to loud music. I get in the car, I turn to the loud music just for 10 minutes and I'm good. It's just that 10 minutes. And sometimes I need to play gospel music to just kind of settle me a little bit. So I have music playlists that I keep going. Sometimes I go for just short walks. I'm in Houston, Texas. So in the summer, you can't really go for short walks unless you get up early in the morning. So I'm very mindful of how and when I take those walks. I got a dog recently. So I got a pandemic dog because I was like, you know what? These other things, I just don't know if it's enough. So we're ready. Under these circumstances, we will get a dog. We cannot have a puppy because we don't have time to train a puppy. We do not want to spend thousands of dollars on a dog. And so I had to think about the parameters in which I would get a dog. And I'm like, wow, this really is nice. I go walking regularly. Y'all check on me in July and August because I don't know what that's going to look like. But we're able to walk. And so I needed to introduce a new thing in order to create some joy. So those are just some of the things that I use that hopefully are helpful. I've got a few more, but I think that's enough for now.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And and you said so how many people are in your family unit and how is everyone acclimating to the dog?
Yeah. Well, I'm claiming the dog for me. She is my dog. You know, my 10-year-old son is here and he's been asking for a dog for a long time. And I told him you're not ready. You're not going to do all the things that need to happen. And so I am very clear that she's my dog. I take her out. My son does have some responsibility because I think it's important for him to learn responsibility at the age of 10. But she's essentially my dog and no one else has to be able to manage her. And I had to be clear about that because, when we have expectations of other people, that can stress us out because we use the word should. Mm-hmm. The word should, by the way, is not in my vocabulary. That's actually part of my self-care. Shooting on myself or shooting on other people. Because when we develop these expectations, that's when we can kind of set ourselves and other people up for failure. So I don't say to my son, well, you should not play video games and play with the dog more. Nope, she's my dog. He can do what he wants to do, and I do what I need to do.
Right. That's very powerful because it's easy to shit on ourselves. But at the end of the day, we have to do the best that we can in any moment and go from there. I love it. And can you share some other tools that you share in your book on how people can actually increase their psychological fortitude?
Well, it's a combination of two things. And I mentioned them already, but probably not in a way that packaged it in in the most helpful way. The first part is making sure not to add things to our life or to our circumstances, that we have control over that's going to take away from our psychological fortitude. A lot of people get stressed out and overwhelmed because we don't have the resources to deal with the things that are on our plate. That's what being overwhelmed is. We've just taken on so much and we're like a little ship and our ship is taking on water and we can manage a little bit of water, but after a while, the ship starts to sink. And so we have to be careful about all of the things that we take on and saying no so that we don't subtract from, end up with a negative. So right now it's PF is supposed to be 0 to 10. We don't want to end up like -2. So we have to be careful about the things that we take on that subtract from our PF. So that's important because oftentimes, not oftentimes, well, sometimes right now in a pandemic, it's hard to have a PF of 9 or 10. But there are people who do. We have to be careful about not overdoing it and taking on excessive things because we're like, I'm feeling good. Yeah, I can organize your party. Yeah, I can chaperone this event. Yeah, I can write, this blog entry. No, be careful about not taking on too much just because we feel good. It's okay to just bask in being at an 8 or a 9 or 10. Anyone who's at a 10 in the middle of the pandemic, please message me. Please follow up with me. I want to know what you're doing at a 10. The other thing, though, yes, is when we're starting to hover around a 6 or 5, we want to add some things, find ways to add joy. If you can't go to connect with friends on happy hour, say once a month, we're going to, at 6 o'clock on this day, we're going to connect. If you need to do it a couple times a month, great. Find out who the core group of folks are. You might need to change core groups every other month or so, but figure out who those people are who are going to add joy and add value to that hour. It really does make a difference. I had a moment where stuff got out of hand before I knew it, because there were folks who were calling on me who needed help. And I want to be there. These were folks who were close to me. But by that afternoon, it was a Friday, I'll never forget. By Friday afternoon, I didn't want to talk to nobody. I didn't want anybody to call me. I didn't want anybody to ask me anything. I said, I don't care who calls. I'm not answering the phone. I text my sister to tell her what was going on, and I turned off my phone. And I don't like being in that space. But actually, after I text my sister, I sent what I call a bat signal. So I sent the bat signal out to a crew of my folks and said, hey, who's available to connect on Zoom tomorrow? I just need some space to be able to build back up to where I was before Friday hit. So that was me recognizing I'm not in a good space. I need some help. Let me get some folks together. And everyone was available and everyone was excited because they were like, yeah, I'm so glad you reached out because I was hoping to connect. And see how that works? Like we try to mind read for other people like, oh, they don't have time. They don't want to be bothered. Well, no, you'd be surprised. People do want to be bothered sometimes, but you got to figure out who they are.
Yes, that is so powerful. I'm glad you said that, especially the first part where you're like, you got to not put so much on your plate because a lot of us think, oh, I'm good at it and I have this space in my schedule so I can do it. And you fill up all the space in your schedule so there's no space in your schedule and there's no time for you. And so when it comes to healthy boundaries, like that is a really big thing that most of us struggle with just learning to say, I can't, or I'm at my capacity, or I can't right now. Let me find a time in the future. But a lot of people find that very hard. So I'm glad you really called that out. I was like, you just cannot put too much on your plate. And then also having those people in your life that could come and say, I got you, or that can respect a healthy boundary. If you say, hey, I need some time off, I need a week off in order to be my best self.
Yeah.
What would you say is like the one thing that you like to do for yourself to like fill yourself back up? You're like, if I do this one thing, I know you said singing in your car is one of those things. Do you have some more things for us that really just fill you up?
Well, I feel pretty renewed when I'm outside. And so I appreciate my back patio when I just need a quick moment. I have a lovely oak tree in the backyard that I don't call me special, but there's just something about that oak tree. I just sit there and, sometimes a bird hangs out and sometimes the bird doesn't. It's just me and my tree. The other thing is that a friend of mine very delightfully told me about a beach that is an hour drive from us, where we can just literally drive the car onto the beach.
Ooh.
She told me about the beach. So pandemic, March, I think by last summer, she told me about the beach. And I was like, drive my car up on the beach. I'll end up stuck. Knowing me, I'll be the person that gets stuck on the beach. And folks are looking at me like, look at that dumb woman over there stuck on the beach. And I didn't go for months. But it was always in the back of my mind. And when I did go, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is perfect. And the last few Fridays, I went once on the weekend. I was like, this was a bad idea. Like, who are all these people on my beach? But when I can carve out some time that I can, in fact, have time to drive for the hour and drive back. And sometimes I have to schedule a call on the way back or on the way there. But even if I can only sit for 45 minutes, I drive the car up on the beach and just sit there. And that is one of the best things that I get to do, even in the middle of a pandemic.
Oh, I love that. Me and the beach, that's my happy place. That is my happy place. And I love that. I feel like we can't have enough things that we do that to love ourselves up, to get loved up with. And another big thing that is important within Get Loved Up is spirituality. So when it comes to spiritual connection with your inner self, what is your go-to for that spiritual connection?
Well, I am very clear that I would not be here, would not have achieved all that I have, would not have the level of resilience that I do if I did not absolutely know that there is a higher power out there that's looking out for me and that ancestors are very much invested in my success. Like this is something that I carry with me and couldn't imagine life without knowing, that there is a God out there. Now, some days I get mad, like, this was unnecessary, like you could have found another way to get my attention. But I am very clear that because there is a higher power, that I also have responsibilities, and I identify as a Christian, that I have responsibilities, for my community. But that's also one reason why I have to be careful about my boundaries, that I don't, end up having to tap out, like I can't help you all anymore. But it is because of that I also sometimes listen to gospel music, and the messaging from gospel music. So there are a few scripture that I have, for different phases of life. So I'll never forget, it was actually a couple years ago, just kind of struggling with some things professionally. And I was like, why am I struggling so hard with this? Like, I'm feeling like I'm in quicksand. I'm fighting and I'm fighting and I'm fighting and I'm just sinking deeper and deeper and deeper. And so I think I must have been in a church service where they talked about, reminded us about Exodus 14:14, and God will fight your battles. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to subscribe to that. I'm not going to fight anymore. And in those moments where I felt like I, was feeling pulled to struggle, I said, God, you said you'd fight my battles. So we got something over here that we cannot handle. And so when I'm able to step away and say, you know what, I've done what I can do. I've done all that I can do. I believe that the universe will take care of this for me. I'm good. I'm good.
I love that. And I think that's so important, just to have an understanding that you're not in this alone. And I mean, we're energetic beings, and there's energy all around us. Like you said earlier, that time in nature and your religion. I too, raised Southern Baptist Christian, and just having those things that you can anchor in. And I'm the same. Like, I listen to all different types of music, but sometimes I just need a nice, strong, and powerful gospel song. No Weapons by Fred Hammond is one of my favorite songs, my go-to songs that I love to listen to. And then Oceans, it's something about those two songs, and then Lauryn Hill. Lauryn Hill and Harry. So I definitely with you on having those playlists that can just get your mind right. I think those are absolutely clutch.
Yeah. And you have to do that. I will say this also, you have to plan and put your playlist together, and know your scripture or whatever it is ahead of time. Like, you can't wait until you're in the middle of the mess, because that's when it's extra hard to dig out and to plan and to problem solve. So that's why, as soon as folks listen to this podcast, just take 5 minutes if you have it, and create the playlist. If you can't create the whole playlist, find 2 songs, small steps, micro steps kind of get you to the big picture.
Absolutely. And you look like the vision of health. I don't know if you're just like born healthy and in shape, or do you have a regular wellness practice, a go-to wellness practice that you go to stay well physically?
I give myself a lot of grace around my health. I will say that I started actually weight training in high school and continued through college and then grad school. And then it's kind of just been hit or miss. And it's funny that you should ask, because I told myself, like, okay, starting May 1, we're going to do something. Now, I haven't set myself up for success yet, because I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do. And May 1 is coming up pretty quickly. And so, but I do actually enjoy exercise. I do. And sometimes it's step aerobics, sometimes it's, just trying to stretch, because I actually need to stretch, and, recognizing that, as we get older, stretching is incredibly important. And so I'm going to figure out something, in part because we're having this conversation. So I have accountability here. And so our next conversation, you're going to say, like, okay, what'd you do? And I'm going to have an answer. I absolutely.
I'm actually going to give you more accountability. I'm going to offer you a Get Loved Up membership. And in that membership, we have classes Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. PST. So you can pop on. But even if you can't miss the classes, because I'm sure your schedule is tight, we have replays that you can enjoy. So I'm going to gift that to you towards your daily movement. We have amazing practitioners that I think you might enjoy. So
I love it. I love it. I'll get ready. I'll start on Monday. Whenever May 1 is. I've lost track of what today is. I don't know.
This weekend, I know it might be Saturday or Sunday. I think it's Saturday, because we're doing a virtual walk with Prevention Magazine too. It's absolutely free. Everyone's walking 3 miles. I know that's a lot, especially if you haven't been walking, but I'm also going to give you with my training program that helps you walk to 3 miles. So you're going to get loved up from me.
And I receive all of the love. I receive all of it. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. So at the end, I like to do just kind of a rapid fire questions just to get to know you more. In the last year, everyone has to go get your book. I'm telling you, y'all have to check her book out. I think that it is a resource everyone should have in their library at home. But what is your favorite book outside of your own that you've read in the last year?
You know, one of the books that I pick up pretty regularly is actually The Four Agreements, and if you're familiar with it, and I'm not going to botch all of the four agreements, because one of the things I try to do is to focus on one at a time, and being impeccable with my word is something that I have been being much more focused on, because I think it's important for relationships. But I actually love The Four Agreements. And so if folks aren't familiar with that one, it's one of my favorites.
I love The Four Agreements too. Let's try it. Be impeccable with your word. Always do your best.
Yes.
Let's see. What's the third one?
We're at the end of the semester, so I'm just going to give you an A. And
never take things personally. Is that one of them?
Yes.
Things personally. Always do your best. Be impeccable with your word. And what's the fourth one?
Impeccable with your word. Not taking things personally. Always do your best. And don't make assumptions.
That was the one. Don't make assumptions. Okay, the fourth one. Don't make assumptions. I think it's so important. And I wanted to share that because that is also one of my favorite books as well. It's actually a prerequisite for anyone coming into our holistic health and yoga teacher training is read that book. Because when you make assumptions, and that's probably the one I need to remember the most, you assume people know, you assume people are okay, which is kind of what we've been talking about most of this conversation. But when you assume, you take away from reality. It's all about having the conversations that need to be had and sharing what you need to share so people can hold space for you.
Yeah. And it's so easy to jump to conclusions. I don't know if it's a cognitive thing, it's an impatience thing. Like, why not take time to ask someone about their experience, or certainly not to jump to conclusions or make assumptions? It really undermines our relationships when we do that.
It really does. It really does. Okay. So, and what is your favorite fruit and your favorite vegetable?
Oh my goodness. So my favorite vegetable is easy. It's Brussels sprouts. Ooh. Brussels sprouts in an air fryer is life.
Okay.
Just life. Favorite fruit? I'd probably say mango. I love mango.
I love mango too. I love that. Okay. And favorite podcast?
Favorite podcast is obviously your podcast.
Oh, well, thank you.
So I say that because of, the holistic health. And that's why, it was important for me to be here, because I know that a lot of people think about physical health, but don't necessarily think about spiritual health, and certainly not emotional health, and how all of those things work together. And I appreciate that you're willing to have that conversation and to have different perspectives, because even when people talk about holistic health, they think about it in different ways. And so I appreciate that you recognize how important it is for us to have these conversations in very different ways, but still trying to get to the same place. Even though my book is the Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health, one of the things that I think is, that permeates a lot of the way that we all interact is through our thoughts, and recognizing our context. And we can't ignore that we live in a racialized society. We all do. But at the end of the day, we want to get to a place where we are our authentic selves, and peacefully authentic, and also achieving our greatest goal, like whatever it is that we were put in life to achieve.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think it is important that anyone who's interested read the book, no matter what race you are, because being able to understand what someone else is going through who's not in the same race as you, it helps you understand some of the things that might not make sense to you. And I know a lot of people have been unpacking that over the last year, like, oh, I didn't know, and I didn't see it from that perspective. And I think, and some people are just afraid to ask. So if they pick up your book, they can get some perspective of what other people are going through. And I think that is really important, especially if you feel like you don't have friends in your community. Everyone doesn't live in a mixed community or a community like California. You have people from every different background you can think of, but growing up, it was just black and white. So now that I've been able to talk to other people, from other places around the world, I feel like it has expanded my knowledge base of how people from different cultures, I don't even look at skin color, because skin color is one thing, but culture is another. Because, people want to lump all brown people in one category and then all white people, or with people with lighter skin and white. And it's like, wait a minute, we all come from different backgrounds and different cultures and different families. It's like, it's really hard to lump people, but there is a lot of discrimination based on skin color alone. And I think that's really important. And I also think culturally understanding different cultures is something that even I don't feel like it's just for one person to understand. I think it's for all of us to like look and see, is there a bias in your life? And how can you look at that and unpack that personally, and knowing that when you do, it's making the world a better place.
Right. And not making assumptions about people.
Right. No assumptions. I love that. 4 agreements. Okay. And then the last one, if you could wake up tomorrow and it is Dr. Walker's world, what would it look like?
Well, I think I'd be in Paris.
Ooh.
And I'd have a small apartment on the Seine River, and there would be room service.
That sounds amazing. Oh, I love that. Well, that sounds absolutely amazing. I know a lot of people are going to want to check you out. So please let everyone know where they can find you and what you have to offer. I don't know I know it's been a packed year, your schedule is probably full, but can you let people know what is available?
Well, I am absolutely pretty active on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel that I maintain because I do try to find ways to get, new skills and to have folks think differently about mental health. And I'm on Twitter, all as Dr. Rheeda Walker. And Rheeda is spelled a little bit differently. It's RHEED as in diamond, A, Walker.
I love that. I love the spelling and I love the D as in diamond. That's beautiful. Awesome. Well, you all definitely go and check her out. She is phenomenal. And I'm so excited to meet you virtually and looking forward to meeting you in person. And you all, until next time, make sure you love yourself, you love others, and you love the world in that order, one day at a time, one breath at a time. Peace and love.
I just want to take a moment to say thank you for being part of the Get Loved Up community. I like to share topics and people making a positive impact in the world, and your feedback means the world to me. If you haven't already left a review, please leave a 5-star review and let me know what you want to hear more of on the show. I'm here for you, and together we're making the world a better place, one day at a time, one show at a time. Thank you for listening.